Hello and welcome to today's webinar on Simplify VSAM to DB2 data sharing on z/OS with PropelZ. So we've done a bunch of survey sessions on PropelZ and some other use cases, but we're going to dive a little bit deeper into this item today. I am Dustin Froyam, one of the co-founders of VirtualZ, and today I have my partner in crime in most of these webinars, Vince Ray, a co-founder and CTO. And also I have Jeannie Glass, our founder and CEO on as well. And like I said, we're going to dive just a little bit deeper into this specific use case. It's right in the wheelhouse of PropelZ, but we'll go through PropelZ in general, some of the challenges in legacy ETL practices, and then we'll look at PropelZ data to distributed DB2. And we'll kind of put Z-Linux in that and crossover, but also PropelZ to mainframe data to mainframe DB2. We get asked about that one quite frequently. And Q&A and conclusion. So let's talk just a little bit about the historical challenges with legacy ETL methods. So one, they're generally going to take up more general processing resources and can be very costly. We often see customers in the 20 and up to 40% of their mainframe general capacity is going towards ETL activities and just sharing that data to data lakes and other platforms. Many of those are put together out of different types of functions or cobbling together different pieces of software, and in some cases completely custom as well. And so that puts some pressure on the labor resources, especially your mainframe talent. As we know, that can be very scarce, and I think you'd want to focus them on higher order activities within your mainframe environment. The lack of agility, we hear about customers that, several of them have talked about, oh, we had an update to, this data or this file, and it takes us 4, 6, 8 weeks to even get that data, structured and through their manual ETL processes out to where they want to share it. And, if you're doing other things, potentially change data capture and, maintaining those legacy ETL structures, that can be pretty costly and fragile from a maintenance standpoint. The other thing we hear a lot about is challenges in, oh, we got to use this tool or this process to get to this data. And so, there can be a lot of disaggregation around that. And so a unifying model that's really no code out of the box can lead to a lot of advantages and cost savings. And then security. We tend to very much take the mainframe view of the world, right? And being the crown jewels of enterprise data being on the mainframe. And so everything we do kind of has an eye towards maintaining the security and fidelity of that mainframe data. So just a diagram, right? This is the legacy ETL model. Often batch processes, right? Overnight or weekly or monthly batch processes, extracting the data, staging it, moving across the wire, maybe doing the transformation on the mainframe, which takes even more resources, and then loading it to its target. Again, this is often several steps or several pieces of code that has to be put together around that. So that's where we came in to try to, kind of change the paradigm, not only in this classic ETL model, but, if you have interest in what we're doing around other data sharing, including read-write, I would encourage you to check that out. But today we're going to focus on PropelZ. So Vince, can you just kind of walk us through the key features and what really makes PropelZ different in the market?
Yeah, no. Well, first of all, thanks, Dusty, and everybody on the call for the time today. So let me describe PropelZ this way. It's really 3 parts. There's an ingestion part, which is about you're bringing data into PropelZ. It turns out PropelZ is pretty open in that regard, but most commonly what we see is mainframe, conventional files. You have VSAM files, QSAM files, GDGs, PDS data sets. I mean, just about any type of file system data that you might have on your mainframe is input to PropelZ. And sometimes that data doesn't even have to be on the mainframe. One of the things that we provide is built-in support for protocols like FTP, so that you can do inputs that resolve down to file transfer. Go fetch some data from another platform, let's say, and then feed that as input through PropelZ. So that's the input stage. Kind of in the middle is the processing stage of PropelZ, and generally what we talk about there is things like record filtering. In other words, you may not want that whole terabyte of data in your VSAM file to be moved to another platform. You might only want a handful of records. You absolutely can do that in a few different ways, based on key ranges or record number ranges, or things like regular expressions that the record has to pass in order to be processed by PropelZ. So, filtering is one part of it. The other really important part is data transformation. So if you're starting out with a VSAM record, it's probably complicated. Most of those aren't just, text, for instance. It might be a couple of fields within the records that are text. It might be, binary data, might be floating point data, might be packed decimal data. All of these data formats that we know and love on the mainframe, but aren't really very common once you get away from the mainframe. So what PropelZ does is it has, and it embeds the VirtualZ transformation engine that's able to use a little bit of metadata that describes what that record looks like. And then we can understand those records at a field by field by field basis. A lot of times that idea of metadata is, the heavy lifting in these kind of systems. It's hard to materialize if you don't have it. So one of the things that we do is we can take that metadata in the format of things you probably already have. The most popular one being a COBOL copybook that describes your VSAM records. So you point PropelZ to a copybook, and that has the layout of your records, and then suddenly we're able to understand each of those records on a field by field basis. And before we get the question, yes, that includes things like different record types. That includes things like arrays, occurs depending on clauses. If you're into COBOL, all of that's supported by our transformation engine, and we do the correct thing so that when you eventually look at that data on the target, I mean, it's certainly up to you if you want bit for bit a blob that matches what that record looked like originally. You can have that. But much more commonly, what you're going to do is use that metadata to break those records into individual columns. And then when you look at the target where that data ends up, you might see, let's say, a database table with a row for every record and columns for all of the fields within the records. And it makes it very, very very, very easy to transform your data in a way that it could be processed anywhere. You're going from these complicated VSAM structures to things that are, appropriate for whatever the target database is. And the way we do this, I'll just add, is it's very open. If you want to, I don't know, name your columns a certain way, you can do that. If you want to create, let's say additional indexes as you do this, or add your own columns that really weren't in that original VSAM file, all of that's possible. And probably the best thing about PropelZ, it's no code. You don't write code to do all the things I just mentioned. It's configuration data options on a command line, that kind of thing. So, that's the input and the processing that we do. Let's talk about the output stage here. And again, this is something that's fairly open in PropelZ. It could be anything, but the most common thing we do is we embed JDBC drivers. So the idea is that you could talk to just about any database that has JDBC capability. That's easily 100 different databases from all sorts of different vendors. Out of the box, we certify and provide 5 that are just ready to go with no configuration whatsoever. Those 5 would be MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, Snowflake, and Microsoft SQL Server. I always forget the 5th one, but but if you need to support anything beyond that, our structure allows us to plug in anybody's JDBC driver, configure the database queries that we issue according to whatever the database needs. And so we can adapt to anything. We offer that as a service. If you want us to do that, we're happy to do that work. If you want to do it yourself, or whatever the preferences there, you're more than welcome to do that. Everything you need is right in the PropelZ package. So that's kind of the process we talk about. It can be, pick whatever source data you want, typically, let's say a VSAM file or some other type of mainframe file, transform it according to the metadata that you select, and then store the output of that in whatever database format you select. One of the cool things that we can do is incremental updates. So, I mentioned before, you don't have to do that entire multi-terabyte VSAM file. You might say, I just want a handful of those records. So one example of that is it's possible to do things like, just process the records that have either been added or changed since the last time you ran PropelZ. So you run PropelZ on a scheduled basis. And when we start up, we'll look at your data, figure out what's changed, and only the changed records get pushed across. So that gives you, a near real-time way of keeping whatever target you like in sync with your data on the mainframe. And unlike some of the other products that are out there that are based on like change data capture, what I describe is an asynchronous process. In other words, you're not slowing down your online transactions because that update that came from that transaction has to go all the way through the network and get to, let's say, an Oracle database. With us, that's happening completely asynchronously on, whatever schedule you care to set. So, depending on your needs, I mean, many sites we talk to create VSAM files, let's say on a daily basis, as a result of production batch jobs. You can very easily just add a step to that says, okay, after that file is created, I want to take the current version of it and push it to really as many of these targets as you need. So copy to Oracle, copy to MySQL databases, copy wherever you need that data. And the throughput here is such that it is possible to do many databases. We see in our test environments, which are, we're a small company, so it's not like we have a giant mainframe. We have the smallest possible mainframe environment you could imagine. And we generally use kind of the free tier on the cloud side, with nothing more than kind of a consumer grade network connection between the two. And even in that environment, we will get 6,000 to 10,000 rows per second, depending on how big the records are and so forth. So a large site doing what I'm describing between a mainframe and maybe an on-prem SQL Server or Oracle, wherever it happens to be, I mean, we would expect you to see maybe 10 times the throughput that we see. And of course, in this day and age when everybody's very concerned about cost, PropelZ itself is a zIIP-eligible application. That means you're not using expensive general purpose MIPS on your mainframe to run PropelZ. You're using a low-cost zip engine. You can run PropelZ as often as you want, and it's not going to drive up the software cost for all the other things on your mainframe. So Dusty, what did I forget to mention that I should touch on?
So Vince, I'm just going to ask you, I'm going to play an animation and maybe ask you to just talk a little bit about the multiplexing capabilities too, if that's okay.
Sure. Yeah, so, and as I said, PropelZ can be, configured to work with just about any database. And, a unique thing in our case is that these can all coexist at the same time. It's just configuration data. So you can have configuration files for, MySQL and Oracle and wherever else you're using in your environment. And what that means is you can run PropelZ over and over again and point to whatever target you want on a command by command basis. So it makes it possible to do things exactly like what you're describing. Take one data set and put it in 10 different places if that's what you need to do. You can even go further than that. You might have, like I mentioned, that our transformation supports files with lots of different record types. So, let's say you have, some VSAM file that has, I don't know, payroll data, and maybe the financial records go to one target, maybe the names and addresses go to a different target, maybe the job descriptions go to a third target. All of that's possible. It's only limited by your imagination what's needed there. And by the way, all of those independently can be done in that incremental style that I talked about. So in effect, what you end up with is it might be one big VSAM file, and different pieces are going to different places, and then as changes are made, those changes end up in those different places, all in parallel.
Thanks, Vince. Yeah, I mean, I know from my previous experiences, there wasn't a single data lake or data store, data was shared differently for different purposes. So I think that has a distinct advantage with our architecture, especially being mainframe centric, right? And then you push that data out to where you want it, if that's what you decide to share.
Yeah, and
So Vince,
one last thing I'd like to share there is all of the things that I'm describing are just drop dead simple. Semi-technical, let's say a business user could do all of the things that I'm talking about. This isn't like a year-long project where you're designing this, that, and the other thing and building all this infrastructure. And this is install PropelZ, which is literally a few minutes, and then just about anyone in your organization can be empowered and getting the benefits of this. So it's kind of a different example on that use case of duplexing. It's not really just about the duplexing. It's that if I don't know, Joe over in some accounting department needs to get some mainframe data into let's say a MySQL database that he runs maybe some Tableau charts and graphs against, he could probably do that with no help whatsoever from anyone other than here's where the metadata files are. So it's designed to be approachable that way. It's not the kind of thing that that your organization is going to have to say, this is a big project and we're going to standardize on this for data movement, and this is intended to be useful for all of those little opportunistic things. And you don't write any code. You don't have to sit down and test let's say a COBOL program or whatever, or an ETL solution or any of that stuff to do this stuff. Just pick up PropelZ and be productive with it. Sorry.
Okay, thanks. No, all good. No, all good. So thanks, Vince. we kind of went through everything, kind of what the baseline of PropelZ is. I'm not sure there's anything unique about DB2 as another target, at least from the cloud and distributed standpoint. But Vince, anything you'd want to kind of point out?
Well, I mean, I think, certainly DB2 is important to mainframe customers, and it's, if we look out over the full market share, out there, it may not be an Oracle or a SQL server, but among the mainframe customers, it's definitely an important platform. So, a number of customers that we've spoken to have this specific need. I've got some legacy data sitting in VSAM files or whatever types of files, and I need to get to a DB2 instance with that. Often that might be DB2 on some other platform. It might be, as you say here, it might be on Linux image running on your mainframe, or really an Intel platform Linux image. It could be in the cloud. It could be wherever it happens to be. It could be hosted in the IBM cloud. It could be wherever that instance of DB2 is. And all of the things I just described work in this case too. We would configure PropelZ with the JDBC drivers that work with DB2, and get all of those same benefits that I talked about going to a DB2 system. On the DB2 side of things, you're free to use all the normal DB2 features. So whatever you're leveraging there, whatever you need that to look like, would be pretty neutral to PropelZ that way. And as I mentioned, if you're trying to do custom things in some way, just a common example of this, sometimes folks like the idea of adding a column to their database tables that has the, let's say a timestamp when that row was written. That may not be in the input data. That might be something that the database supplies as the as rows are added. You absolutely can configure PropelZ to do those sorts of things. Whatever you need. If you wanted to do procedures and that kind of stuff inside the database that detects, oh, here's some data coming in, let me enrich it with maybe data that comes from a completely different source. Maybe it comes from a different table in this database that I want to do some analytics on and include with the rows that we're populating. That's possible also. And the reason we can do this is the target doesn't require any of our code. We're talking, and this is a little bit unique for this kind of product, we talk directly to the target database as though we were any other database application. Doesn't matter to us whether it's what type of database it is. We do everything from ZOS. So again, unlike some of the competing technologies here, you don't need a mid-tier someplace that's got code running on it that's doing some of this work. You don't need code where the database server ultimately is running. All you need is PropelZ on ZOS, and it's going to connect directly into the target database. And one of the advantages of that is also that it makes it much easier to understand and much simpler, especially when things don't work as you expect. We talked to a customer that described an example of his target database filled up, and so he's streaming data. I think they were using Kafka or MQ, something like that. So they're streaming data outbound. They have a middle tier that's taking those records and turning them into inserts to the database. But of course, none of that's working because the database is full. Eventually, everything slips out of sync, and that's hard to know from the context of the ZOS application who submitted all of this. With our case, because we're directly connected, something goes wrong, that immediately. We put out the message that the database generates so that you could see, database is full, or, you don't have security to update this, or, whatever the specific issues are, that's going to be visible to you from ZOS itself in real time as you're doing the update. So, much simpler architecture that way. And of course, that also means it's going to be much faster than going through a mid-tier. You don't have to, if you think about it, a lot of these solutions end up making multiple passes through the data. You read the data on ZOS, write it to the network. Another application reads the data from the network, writes it to the database. I mean, you might be making 2, 3, 4 passes of the data in that case. In our example, there's only one pass of the data. We read the data and it turns into JDBC traffic, against that target database.
All right, Vince. I know this one has come up a few times as well. So we started to be asked about, well, if you can move it to, distributed or cloud instances of DB2, can we use it to, move VSAM or QSAM data to mainframe-based DB2?
Yeah, and absolutely, that's a possibility as well. If you've got a VSAM file that you're trying to figure out, how do I get this into, as nice, neat, normalized tables in, DB2 on a ZOS system, either the local system or, maybe it's a data center you have on the other side of the planet running, mainframe with, DB2 in it. I mean, both of those are possible. As long as you have connectivity to that DB2 system, we can push the data there. And again, it's a little bit different configuration data, but again, there's no code here. There's nothing particularly special you have to do. One extra advantage of this is because of our architecture, because we're going through that JDBC layer, it turns out, as I said before, our code is zip enabled. It turns out DB2 itself, for processing all of these transactions, is going to dispatch that work on zip engines as well. So both sides of this diagram end up exploiting zip engines and avoiding any use of general purpose CPU capacity. If you're doing this a lot, that's a really significant point, because I mean, some folks, even, some IBM folks have shared with us that some customers spend, very substantial amount of their MIPS capacity just moving data around, as we're talking about. If you got, 10, 20, 30, 40% of your MIPS being used for moving data around, being able to offload that to zip engines could be a very dramatic cost savings in real dollar terms, and not just on the Propel software, but on all of the things that are licensed in some type of subcapacity model, where that peak 4-hour moving average that we always talk about in these circles dictates what your cost might be. So a lot of financial advantages, not just technical and performance and all the other things we're talking about, but also real dollar savings by leveraging zip that way.
That's a great segue to my next point, Vince. So I'll just mention, PropelZ is an extremely flexible tool, and actually supports a lot of different solutions and use cases. So beyond, kind of just populating a database or a data lake, for AI, BI, reporting, data sharing, I think some of the most interesting ones is, really around what we can do with tape data, right? From a storage standpoint, or a migration or conversion from legacy mainframe tape, as well as, SMF, console messages, DB2 logs, again, both from a storage standpoint, or an accessibility into your observability platform, or just getting it so it's very searchable off mainframe as well. So check those out. We have I'll talk a little bit about the resources we have available to kind of go into some of those other solutions and use cases. Which kind of leads me to PropelZ is very, very cost effective, especially if you start looking out in the market, even for tools that are, supposedly out of the box. So for the enterprise, it's just $50,000 per year, and it supports all of those solutions that I just mentioned as well. So not just the moving it to a different database that comes with the 5 drivers that Vince said, and then if you needed a different driver, again, that's a fairly nominal charge, $5,000 to $10,000 depending on the driver, for us to test it, optimize it, and deliver that. All right, so I'm gonna move on to Q&A here. So feel free to type questions in the chat, but Vince, I do have a question that I did receive. So what about kind of on this security topic? What if you didn't want to share a particular field from your data set out to, say, a data lake or something like that? How does that work with PropelZ?
Yeah, the data transformation we do is kind of on a per request basis. And one of the cool things you can do there is, Dusty, if you and I both ran PropelZ, we don't have to use the same metadata. The one that you use might be really detailed and have all of the fields, and then all of that data is going to end up out in the, whatever the target is. The one that I use might just have, I guess I'll call it filler for many of those fields. And in that case, you won't see any of that data. You'll just see maybe name and address, or whatever makes sense to you. So yeah, you can absolutely have different users using different metadata, and then if the target is going to see either all the fields or a subset of the fields as you see fit. Again, and of course, it probably goes without saying, but when it comes time to actually reading that input file, normal ZOS security rules apply there. I don't get to use PropelZ to read something I couldn't read anyway. So I need access to the file, at least read access to the file, and then the metadata is going to control which individual fields get populated to the target.
Thanks, Vince. So
Yeah.
just a little, and it was something you brought up earlier too, around the, when we're talking about the multiplexing. So given that's, both the kind of the metadata that we use in the data transformation, and then not only multiplexing to potentially different database targets, but let's say it's just DB2 itself. So does that multiplexing and the metadata use really apply if you say, oh, I want to populate both my mainframe DB2 instance and my, Linux DB2 instance or my cloud instance? Does that multiplexing apply as there as well?
Yep. They are just two different targets to us. And yeah, you can have, all of the things I talked about can be specified on a kind of command line basis for every transaction. So, you could have different columns, you could have different, even different, supplemental data included in that row. Depends just on the configuration that you set up. And, certainly part of what we do in the engagements would be help the customer through this, at least the first time, to, make it clear what the options are and all of that. We're pretty confident, though, that any result you want to achieve can be done with PropelZ using the features I'm talking about here.
Okay, thanks, Vince.
Yep.
So I'll just mention here as we close, I meant there's several webinars here that dive into deeper topics like the, cloud or tape to cloud, the unified data access. So those are pretty interesting, as well as, just the general overviews of PropelZ and our other products as well. Lozen really being the real-time read-write access. So really maintaining the mainframe as your system of record, and then being able to do that real-time read-write access to cloud applications or other things that are needing to have that data. The interesting part about that is really a discrete, you can discrete data elements. There's no, ETL activity related to that. So you're not, moving all kinds of data. If you just need to have a specific record, or you make a specific update to a mainframe record. And then Zach, around kind of the storage, in particular, the storage capabilities of Zach. There's other use cases as well, but I think the thing that the market is really interested in is the storage capabilities, both as mainframe tape and mainframe disk in the same product. All these are no code. And mainframe centric. So it gives you some really interesting flexibility options there. And then, we have blogs on all of this stuff, demos on demand. Of course, you can trial our products if needed, and then lots of different resources on social media as well. And then events, both where we're going to be in person, you can meet us, as well as our webinar series or other event notifications are in there under that tab as well. And so, yeah, I hope you'll join us for a future webinar as we dig into some other use cases. Next week, we're going to talk about PropelZ and Snowflake integration in particular. And yeah, thank you for joining us today, and hope you'll join us in the future. Thank you.